Hello, and welcome back to Zenin Fanfics. Today we're starting part 8 of an exciting new series. What if Deku had blood manipulation quirk? If you enjoy this video, please like and subscribe for more content. The story we're featuring is written by Judas Magnus 1994 on archiveofourown.org. You can find all the relevant links in the description, so be sure to check out the author's profile and say hello. Now let's dive into the story. Nine remained calm despite the situation's development after returning to the base. He saw on TV that Valdo and all the people he had left in Japan were defeated by the heroes in the end, something he didn't expect but was okay with. Nine considered that if Valdo was able to win against the heroes of Japan, then he was fit to fulfill his ambitions. His defeat showed to Nine that he wasn't as powerful as he wanted to appear when he modified his own body to look like All Might. There was something poetic in a way when he saw how All Might's apprentice was the one that defeated that man that wanted to style himself as the next All Might to the point to discard his original identity to fulfill that delusion. Valdo Gallini was a man who respected and worshipped All Might's strength, but he was unable to fully imitate that power even with the help of that girl that they dragged to his base. That over-modification quirk that said girl had was quite enticing to have despite the side effects. But the fact that his real allies and himself were incompatible with it, and they felt a painful backlash by being near her, then Nine was considering getting rid of her at a later date. Nine, we may be under attack, one of his friends, Slice said to him. She came to report him about that girl, and that rat that entered the base sudden disappearance. I see, but how? Nine asked. That girl that the Gallini family had located in a room had disappeared out of thin air when we managed to catch a crippled man that tried to rescue her. Slice said she remembered seeing how the man that was critically injured as her hair pierced his side alongside other parts of his body suddenly disappeared in front of her, leaving the blood on her hair and the ground as the only proof of that man's existence. That unexpected, but be prepared for a fight. Valdo and those that we left behind in Japan had lost against the heroes, so it's time for us to enter the... Nine was about to say that, but then he saw how Slice was banished out of thin air. What? That caused him to get concerned and decided to see if one of the quirks that he had stolen to locate people could find her, and then he sensed that she was somehow out of the castle. Nine decided to create a portal made of mist to reach her position, and then he saw that he was outside of the castle. The area was filled with the bodies of almost all the villains that were there, and then he saw the kid that he almost wrote off when he heard from some men of the Gallini family that he was about to be executed by one of them. That kid now was holding an unconscious Slice by the neck before letting her fall to the ground. So you are the one that has now the original AFO, Izuku said. He had decided to deal with the people in the base first before targeting Nine after he dealt with Anna's quirk for good. Izuku managed to just readjust over-modification genetic quirk factors by weakening the quirk itself to the point that now it required an active effort for Anna's part to be turned on while also adding a switch in her quirk that was what the quirk lacked by default. Now that the quirk not only was drastically depowered, but also had now added some basic functionality that should have to be with her by default, then over-modification would never again threaten her life because of the strain of being constantly on. It appears that I underestimated you, Nine said. He saw that Izuku was surrounded by not only his allies, but also people of the Gallini family and the Dr. Garaki himself. All of them were unconscious, and even though Izuku's white suit was covered with blood, Izuku barely looked injured or exhausted. Spare me the villainous speeches, AFO. I will make sure that this time you are out of this world for good. Izuku said. He got his hands on Dr. Garaki, and after forcing him to reveal what he had been doing in the past, Izuku was now aware that he was in front of AFO's next vessel. But even if the man in front of him wasn't fully AFO yet, Izuku wasn't taking any chances. You can try it if you wish, but I warn you that I will kill you, because you not only are in the way of my dreams, but also have injured my allies. Nine said. He activated an improved version of his scanning quirk that had been enhanced by Dr. Garaki. And when he looked at Izuku, his body was overwhelmed for a couple of seconds as his mind was unable to process the information about Izuku's quirk. Izuku took advantage of those seconds and rushed at the man with the intention of getting rid of him. But the moment his right hand connected with Nine's face, Izuku felt something similar to what happened in the summer camp, and then his mind went blank. The sound and the smell of sewage water were the first things that Nine was able to sense when his mind was able to process what was happening to him after trying to use scanning to gain information about Izuku. He was now inside an underground passage that was littered with corpses and sewage water. Nine had no choice but to walk forward as the screams of agony and the sound of destruction echoed in this place. "Where is Yuichi?" Nine saw a tall and muscular man with white hair who was too sharply dressed to be in this place. He was covered with blood while holding a severed hand with his right hand. The man was looking at a group of people who were dressed in military gear and were frozen in fear after seeing what had transpired. You monster," one man who was a little braver than most said as he replied to the man's question. Nine saw that no one in this place acknowledged his existence at all, as he got near one of those individuals and there was no reflection in their eyes. "Where is Yuichi?" the man asked again. Nine paid attention to his free hand and saw that there was a hole in the center of his palm. That meant that the man in front of him was AFO. Nine said. He had been having strange dreams about similar scenarios in which he saw himself killing people and stealing his quirks. He did believe that they were just dreams, but they were always the same thing no matter what. "You killed him, you freak," another man said, and then he saw how AFO refused to even acknowledge that question, and then repeated the same question again. "Where is Yuichi?" Nine saw how AFO repeated himself one last time before deciding to kill those people with no mercy. Nine saw the sheer brutality that AFO showed to those individuals before he got rid of them. "Yuichi may be up ahead." Nine saw how AFO said that, and then he walked deeper into this place. Nine followed him to see if he could find a way from this place. But the only thing he saw was how AFO was releasing powerful attacks to kill those people that ran away from him. And then one scrawny man with white hair tried to get in the way, but AFO killed him out of reflex. That man's blood soaked AFO's body, and the only thing that remained from said man was one single hand, which then was picked up by AFO. "Where is Yuichi?" Nine heard that question again, and then he saw the same group that AFO viciously killed, but they were fine. You monster," one man who was a little braver than most said, as he replied to the man's question. Nine saw that scene repeating again in front of him, and then he started to realize what was going on. "I am seeing AFO's memory somehow. But how is that possible?" Nine said, seeing how the conversation that he witnessed before was now repeating itself with the same outcome. "Because AFO is not a normal Quirk," Izuku said, appearing from behind Nine. Izuku was glaring at the villain, but he wasn't taking any action. "What do you know about this?" Nine asked, being quite wary about the situation and refusing to drop his guard. A quirk in a way is the soul of a person. It contains a part of our consciousness, memories, and even feelings, a thing that in a normal case would be a non-important matter. But AFO and OFA are special quirks, as both can house multiple quirks inside of them. But while OFA can coexist with their host, and those that were part of it before the transfer, Izuku said as he started to feel how something inside of him was going haywire. He saw how Nine's body was starting to convulse as red lightning emerged from his stomach. AFO will only allow one quirk consciousness to rule over the others. And it appears that you weren't the one in control at all. Izuku said as Nine's stomach exploded, and from it, the arms of AFO emerged as AFO broke from Nine's body from within. "He is good to be back." Izuku saw how AFO was now back from the abyss of death, as he had cheated death and returned to the land of the living by sacrificing one man's whole existence to return to cause havoc again. "You BSTRD, ugh," Izuku said, but then he felt a sharp pain in his stomach as something small tore his way out from there, and then he joined AFO Vestige. "You are Yuichi's," AFO said as said fragment of his quirk that lay dormant inside Izuku, after he inadvertently absorbed a small fragment of AFO's broken quirk factor that now joined with him in AFO's inner world. "Not in the mood for a heartwarming family reunion with you, you villain freak," Izuku said while groaning in pain. The inner world of AFO was something that Izuku only managed to connect once thanks to OFA power and his own quirk joining both quirk worlds into one for a while. But he was now inside the enemy territory with no way out. "Your words hurt me, child. But at least I can sense that despite being Yuichi's descendant, you have a lot in common with me." AFO said with a smirk on his face. That fragment of his quirk that lay dormant inside Izuku did give him information about Izuku's way of thinking and other things. And when he saw that Izuku was as kind-hearted as Yuichi in the past, but now was a more hardened version of him that had taken some traits that AFO recognized as his, he felt a sense of pride of him despite knowing that Izuku was the one that gave his original body the fatal blow that ended his life. AFO could see in Izuku's now a version of his brother that may have been more willing to join him despite being ideologically opposed. Unfortunately, I agree. No amount of therapy can make me not want to cause severe damage at the thought of someone that I care about being injured. But I am not you. I have morals and standards, a thing that you lack, Izuku said, trying to distract him as he tried to figure out a way to escape from this place. I agree. Your strange version of AFO is quite fascinating. Instead of stealing the whole quirk, you just take the genetic quirk factors and use your body and blood to perfectly replicate those quirks. An interesting way to sidestep the problem of having multiple quirks, AFO said. Call it how you want it, but I am going to stop you again, AFO, Izuku said as he prepared himself to cut his connection with AFO. That is quite unfair for me, don't you think? You may be not Yuichi, but I will not going to commit the same mistake that I did all those years ago when I killed my dear brother by mistake. So I have to go easy on you even if I know that you can take it, AFO said. Don't go fishing up for excuses now, AFO. You are going down again, and this time for good, Izuku said, and then he activated a razor spot inside AFO's inner world to brute force his way out. Then, in the real world, a shockwave of red lightning pushed both Izuku and Nine in different directions. Both were unconscious now, but before Izuku could hit the ground, Mirio appeared out of nowhere and caught Izuku before gently letting him into the ground. Midoriya, Mirio said. He looked at Izuku and saw that he was out of commission for a while. He then looked at when the other person was sent and saw how the man that warped Izuku out of Japan was slowly walking in his direction, and then he felt an overwhelming sense of dread. No way. This can't be. He is back. The voices of the vestiges inside OFA only served to make Mirio realize that what they feared could happen when Izuku warned them about AFO dying, with a copy of AFO ended up happening. AFO had returned. AFO had returned, Mirio said. He watched how the villain who had AFO's quirk inside him was now looking at him with some interest. So you are the next wielder of my brother's quirk, AFO said. He was now in full control of Nine's body and mind as he waited for the perfect moment to overtake him. But Izuku's intervention, and when he assimilated a broken fragment of the copy of his quirk caused him to overpower Nine's weaker mind, forced him to improvise on the fly. That broken fragment of his quirk factor that Izuku assimilated when his original body expired, thanks to how Izuku's quirk reacted to the quirks that he had a connection through DNA, allowed AFO's consciousness to survive the death of his original body. He was in a way trapped inside Izuku's quirk, and while he pulled himself together, he studied how Izuku quirk worked, and was surprised to see how a mutation of AFO managed the capacity issues that he faced, but he had to permanently cripple that boy without killing him, so he could find a way to extract OFA with ease when he managed to replicate the way that Izuku's quirk was able to connect with both OFA and AFO. Yes, Mirio said, preparing himself to fight against AFO again. The last time, AFO's body was quite damaged and he had both All Might and Izuku's help during that fight. But now, he was on his own as he used float to fly as fast as he could to Nabo Island when he was told by Detective Naomasa that they located Izuku's position thanks to his phone GPS location when they used some of the computers inside the HPSC main building to remotely activate the hero network in his phone to locate him. There were no words needed after that as Mirio rushed to try to strike down AFO in one hit, but AFO blocked that attack with an air wall that was strong enough to absorb all the damage of that punch of his before sending Mirio flying away into the ruins of the castle. It's time for me to reclaim what is mine, my brother's quirk and his descendants, AFO said as he looked at the unconscious Izuku one last time before going to fight Mirio. That kid and his mother were part of his family thanks to the fact that they are both descendants of Yuichi, and that makes them his property as well. He was not going to repeat what he did with his brother when he got in the way as he was trying to find him and use one of the quirks at his disposal to make sure that Izuku was not going to interfere in the fight while also keeping him safe from harm. In this way, he could fight to his fullest without worrying about the chance of killing Izuku by mistake if he decided to get in the way. Ugh, Mirio grunted as he managed to pull himself out of the rubble that fell on him when he landed on the ruins of the castle. The pain that he had endured after he landed was already healing up, but he knew that it would be a matter of time before AFO decided to get where he was to fight him. He then saw how a gigantic head of a blue snake came from one of the sides of the ruins and tried to ram into him. But Mirio barely managed to dodge it thanks to danger sense. Then multiple heads started to break through the walls, and Mirio had to run away from them to avoid being crushed by them. AFO was having fun testing the waters with this new body and the quirks that Nine possessed before he took over. Nine's body had been strengthened by the doctor, and while he felt that this body was able to handle more quirks than his old one, AFO was still having some trouble getting this body fully under his control, even though Nine consciousness was destroyed. This body was now his to command, but he needed to get used to it to get better mileage out of it. So he hoped to drag the fight for a while so he could get quickly used to it before moving into incapacitating that brat. So with that in mind, he decided to mix up things a little with that Hydra quirk by adding some other ones to make those heads breathe things like fire or laser beams from their mouth with the intention of keeping up the pressure on Mirio to tire him out. A detail that now in hindsight should have to be the thing that he had needed to do in the past while fighting the previous wielders in order to find a way to steal OFA before they reached Nana Shimura. The 5th and 6th wielders could have been the ones in which AFO could have managed to recover his brother's quirk if he had decided to just cripple them for life, so he could torture them into giving him the quirk over trying to kill them. But for that realization to come to his mind, he had to die first and came to that conclusion as he saw how Izuku was playing a video game about capturing creatures and saw how Izuku decided to just weaken them first to the point that they were unable to resist his attempts to capture them. He should have done that before the quirk reached Nana Shimura, who decided to just transfer OFA to All Might before fighting him to the death. So he was going to do what Izuku did in that game. He was going to try to tire out Mirio first before moving in to neutralize him to then try to steal OFA from Mirio at a later date. He had a limited amount of time to do that in case that some heroes decided to appear out of nowhere to try to get in the way. He just hoped to get things done quickly. In Atheon, the top heroes around the world finally managed to deal with the Nomus that has been playing the island, and those 3 that keep them unable to communicate with the rest of the world. The heroes had to deal with the protection of the civilians that they rescued while preventing the Nomus from breaching the perimeter, and that had put a lot of the heroes sent there to the test. That had been a stressful situation, and the bad weather and the fog demoralized them somewhat. All Might and Star and Stripes had to not only be frontline fighters, but also had to try their best to keep the morale from going down. Not only for the heroes, but also the civilians who were scared and panicking with the constant rain and fog that deprived them of sunlight almost all the time. The age of peace that All Might brought to the world did, unfortunately, let a lot of heroes get overconfident. And even when the events of the League of Villains showed that the villains could get dangerous enough to threaten the peace, no hero in other country decided to try to get serious as they considered that after the death of AFO, that things would return to normal and that this was only a thing that happened in Japan. But now they were shown that they weren't safe as well. The loss of track of time somewhat as the lack of sun, and that the electronic devices were almost disabled thanks to the constant electric storm didn't help to keep the spirits high. But in the end, the heroes pushed forward thanks to All Might and Star and Stripes' efforts and leadership, but it appeared that there was no rest for them as now that the communications were restored. The heroes there received the news about how the coalition between the Galini family and a villain called Nine tried to take over Japan after the corruption of the Japanese HPSC was revealed to the world, and now the fight moved to Nabo Island as Mirio flew there as fast as he could. All Might saw how Mirio was able to fight against a man who looked like him in order to hold order and peace in Japan, and then All Might knew that he needed to return to Japan fast, but it appears that for the time being, he wasn't going to be able to return to Japan. Damn it, All Might said. He clenched his fists in frustration as he saw that there weren't any planes available in the airport as the constant thunderstorms destroyed them, and they were sitting ducks until someone came to pick them up. All Might, Star and Stripes said. She in a way had fulfilled a dream of hers, as she had managed to fight side by side with All Might during this mission, even if it took that dark turn. I need to return to Japan as soon as possible. AFO is behind this, and I am worried for their safety, All Might said as he looked at the clear sky, concerned about the fate of Izuku and Mirio as they were fighting AFO, as he was sure that whatever person had the original AFO was behind this. I see, Star and Stripe said as she then tried to make some calls now that all their devices were working again. The future was quite uncertain, as even if they had managed to restore order in Atheon after finding out about the massacre that had been carried out in the main base of Hummerais, the mastermind that had them trapped inside this island for more than 1 month was in Japan, and now only one person was being able to fight against him. In Nabo Island, the sounds of how Mount Shiroyama was being destroyed reached the ears of the civilians who abandoned their houses as the force of that fight between Mirio and AFO was strong enough to cause some smaller earthquakes. The island had recently suffered a constant stream of disappearance of tourists that came from all around the world, but that had been kept under wraps as not only AFO's influence on that island was strong enough, but also a lot of people living there were his pawns that lived there and followed his orders. After AFO's first death, Dr. Garaki ordered the people to try to kidnap tourists to send them to their base in Mount Shiroyama so he could start to create more nomas for AFO, who was now living as 9. And they did as ordered and managed to target those tourists that were coming there alone to not raise too much suspicion until the past months in which they had been told to keep one residential area free for the people of the Galini family to reside there. They saw on the news how All Might's successor had defeated Valdo Galini, and after seeing how he said that the battle wasn't over yet, they feared that he would come here for some reason. They were too preoccupied with seeing how Mount Shiroyama was being destroyed by that clash of powers to pay attention to 2 foreigners who were boarding a yacht that a certain butler stole from a Japanese criminal to reach Nabo Island to rescue Anna. Giulio Gandini hated heroes as much as he hated villains, as he believed that they were nothing but hypocrites that preached pretty words and did things for their own interest. He doesn't think they'll care enough for even the most fragile of people like Anna was. But then Izuku went and showed to him that he actually cared about saving people, as he saved Anna's life for good, even if he told him that he came here to put an end to the Galini family, to the point of prioritizing saving her life over doing his job case. As he said to him, if a hero can ease the pain that someone is enduring, they should do it without question. Giulio was somewhat skeptic of that boy, and was almost willing to call him someone that only said those things for show. But then he saved Anna's life while manipulating her quirk to the point that it would never put her life in danger again. Not only because it was now able to be turned on and off at will, but because the power boost that her quirk gave was now quite minor. Do you think that he is all right? Anna said, catching her breath as she was now inside the yacht. She saw how Giulio was preparing to start the engine on it, but then she looked at her. He is a hero after all? Giulio said as he then started the engine and piloted the yacht away from the island. Giulio's opinion of heroes didn't change at all, even if Izuku saved Anna's life. But he at least believed that Izuku was worthy of being a hero who could be trusted, and he hoped that fate would be kind to him, as Izuku was kind to both him and Anna's situation. The yacht left the port of Nabo Island back to Japan's mainland, and then they would figure things out from there. But he honestly hoped that fortune smiled upon Izuku. Some helicopters, the property of some of the most profitable Japanese news stations, were now reaching Nabo Island to see how multiple gigantic blue snakes were destroying Mount Shiroyama while causing some earthquakes that reached Japan. They were recording and streaming what they were capturing on their cameras, and they had to rely on the zoom on those cameras to try to get footage while keeping a safe distance. The size and speed of those gigantic snakes that came out of nowhere would mean a death sentence for those who dared to get near this fight without being prepared. Mirio realized that AFO was trying to wage a fight of attrition on him to exhaust him enough so AFO could capture him. And Mirio decided to take the initiative and face AFO head-on to take him out before AFO managed to get the better of him. Using his own quirk, Mirio permeated his body to get out of the ruins of the castle, which were now collapsing, and launched himself into the air while keeping his momentum. Mirio saw how more of those snakes emerged from whatever place AFO was using to summon them, and Mirio maneuvered in the air to avoid being hit by them. But being rammed for one of them was the least of his worries. AFO was combining his quirks with this one, and while he summoned multiple snakes to try to reach Mirio, Those snakes were able to spit multiple things, from fire to lightning, and even blood, but now that Mirio wasn't confined inside the castle and had time to breathe, he was able to dodge those same attacks that almost caught him by surprise when he was trying to get his footing back after AFO sent him there. Mirio saw the helicopters, and that made him realize that if AFO saw them, then AFO would take advantage of their presence to get the drop on him. As Mirio suspected that AFO was willing to strike those helicopters down to distract him and force him into trying to save the people inside them before they could fall to their deaths. So he needed to keep AFO's focus on himself to avoid any collateral damage. With that in mind, he decided to dive into where AFO was in order to take the fight to where the villain was located. Mirio flew around trying to locate AFO while dodging the snake's attacks. And when he found him, he dived into his position as fast as he could, using permeation as he got closer to the villain to pass through those snakes undisturbed. AFO was partially surprised when he saw how Mirio was about to punch him in the face, but he activated Air Wall to defend himself. A shame that Mirio learned his lesson and just permeated through the air wall, leaving AFO surprised for a couple of seconds before he saw that the snakes that he had summoned weren't stopping and were about to clash with him. AFO had no choice but to keep Air Wall up as all those heads clashed with it. He was starting to get the hang of his body and the quirks that Nine favored, but he was still struggling with it. He stood tall as those heads clashed with the air wall, and then he deactivated that particular quirk, thinking that it was time to switch tactics to defeat All Might's successor. AFO was this close to finally reclaim OFA, and now that he discovered that Yuichi had descendants, then he was going to recover the family that he had lost a long time ago in one way or another. As that fight between the now revived AFO and Mirio, some of the villains that Izuku had incapacitated before he was incapacitated when AFO decided to take over Nine were starting to wake up. Nine, the woman whose villain name was Slice, said. She saw in the distance how Nine and Mirio were fighting, completely unaware of the fact that the man that she considered a friend and comrade was now truly dead to the world. Her other comrades, Mummy and Chimera, were also starting to wake up and then focused on the brat that had taken them out. Izuku Midoriya was now sitting on the ground, his back resting on a tree as some black vines enveloped his body as he was asleep. That's, Chimera said as he recognized that the kid was under the effect of one quirk that Nine had that allowed him to keep people immobilized in one place while preventing them from escaping. Said quirk was named Maleficent Slumber, and it was named after a fairy tale of old, in which one evil fairy cursed a princess into an endless sleep until she was awakened by a kiss. Or that is what those child movies showed. The real fairy tale was far darker. The quirk caused the victim to be forced into sleep while their bodies were covered by dark vines made of energy that, while not lethality, pricked the victim's body pressure points to keep them under a state of slumber and paralysis until the user of the quirk decided to cancel it. That quirk could sustain itself if the victim was in contact with an area with a lot of vegetation, and it also protected the victim from any harm, as those vines would attack those that try to get near them to harm the victim. None of them understood why Nine decided to use that quirk on Izuku, and they considered that maybe he had to rely on that quirk to stop them as he then had to deal with Mirio. They decided to just try to kill Izuku, as he was somewhat defenseless in that state, and while Chimera was about to deliver that fatal blow with his fire breath, as he was charging up that attack, someone appeared out of nowhere from the sky and slammed their foot on his head, causing Chimera to fire that attack into the ground before his head hit the floor as well. Well, someone had been having fun here, the hero that interrupted Chimera said. Both Mummy and Slice were looking at the iconic rabbit ears of the heroine Mirko, who had descended from the sky as she had hitched a ride on Ryukyu as she was transformed and decided to dive in to save Izuku's life. You, Slice said, seeing in the horizon how a lot of heroes were coming from either the air, like Ryukyu, who had transformed into her dragon form, or in boats that were closely reaching the port in Nabo, and would be on them soon enough. You know, I was quite sad to see how that guy took Midoriya away from the battlefield as the others and I were fighting tooth and nail to save the people there while repelling Dark Might's assault. But it appeared that he had been pulling his weight around here. By the looks of it, if the massive amount of incapacitated villains that I am seeing are to be taken into consideration, Mirko said. She had been one of the few heroines who joined forces with Izuku and the other heroes to capture the people of the HPSC, because as much as Hawks was one of their agents, he had been a hero and a friend to her. So she wanted to avenge his death by making sure that those that refuse for him to get proper medical attention are in jail for the rest of their villainous lives. We can do this, Slice. The others are waking up, and unless they want to be captured, they will fight for their freedom, the villain named Mummy said, more to convince himself of the idea that they had a way out, but his tone of voice betrayed his words of encouragement. Please do it. I am still itching for a good fight, and while Dark Might and his helpers had been fun to kick around, I hadn't had my fill yet, Mirko said with a vicious smile. Slice saw that they had no choice but to fight not only Mirko, but also the slot of heroes that were going to soon reach their position. She knew that their chances were slim, but she was going to fight to at least by time of 9, so he could finish that fight that he was having in Mount Shirayama so he could join them. She held the hope that once 9 joined in, then they would defeat the heroes of Japan to establish their perfect society. But the sad thing was that 9 wasn't there anymore. In the airport of Atheon, a state-of-the-art military aircraft that belonged to the USA Army had recently landed there on the request of Star and Stripe, who wanted to allow All Might and Sir Nightai to return to Japan as fast as possible to see if his hunch of AFO being back was true or not. Thanks, Timothy, Star and Stripe said as she saw how a military plane that belonged to the Army landed on the airport with the intention of carrying both All Might, Sir Nightai, and herself to Japan in case. Despite the size of the plane, it was fast enough to allow travel from America to Japan in less than half an hour, while allowing a small group of people to fly inside it aside from the pilot. She was surprised when she heard how Timothy considered her request of moving that plane to use it as an emergency taxi to reach Japan in record time as a tame request on her part. A thing that she had to admit, as she was aware that her way of doing things as a heroine alongside her personality did give poor Timothy a lot of headaches, but she was happy to see that she could count on him even in this situation. The three of them entered the aircraft and saw that Timothy had thought in everything as they saw that there were parachutes ready for them to use as they sat on the seats on the bag and put them on. The live stream about how Mirio and AFO were trading blows while partially destroying Mount Shirayama that both were seeing on Sir Nightai's phone gave both All Might and Sir Nightai a small hope that they still had time to reach the area and join the fight. All Might in a way felt that he failed to uphold his duty to deal with AFO for good, as in the end was Izuku the one that gave him the finishing blow to his real body. It was stupid of him to feel like that, but the fact that Izuku had to stain his hands in AFO's blood and taint his soul in a way at such young age when he was forced to kill AFO to save Mirio made feel him like he had failed both Izuku and Mirio, as he considered that AFO continued existence after that cruel fight that crippled him was his burden to carry and something that he had to solve himself. This was less about his pride, but a sense of responsibility and duty that he needed to uphold to honor his mentor. He would be happier anyway if Mirio put down AFO for good before they reached Nabo Island. But if that wasn't the case, then he needed to join the fight, not only to make up to both Izuku and Mirio for not being fast enough to join the fight and leave AFO to them, but to truly avenge Nana Shimura and the lives of those that were destroyed by AFO and his evil schemes. Tenko Shimura would grow and live in a world in which he would be safe from the shadow of the man who destroyed his family and corrupted him into becoming a villain before Izuku gave him another chance at life, even if it was the last thing that he would do with his life. This isn't good, Mirio thought as the battle with AFO continued. Mirio was trying to keep up the pressure in order to find an opening to kill AFO, as Mirio saw that AFO was having some trouble managing his new body, but the more time passed, the more used to his new body AFO got, and the same trick that he pulled before to force those snakes to hit AFO was something that he was unable to pull off again as AFO gained full control of that quirk. I never trained with the quirks that I stole, and simply decided to stack as many powerful quirks that I stole to reach the position that I had now. But now I am starting to realize that maybe I should have tried to train with them a little to get better results. AFO said he had recalled all the snakes that came from his back, and then extended his hand. Seconds later, 5 gigantic snake-like creatures emerged from his fingertips and rushed at Mirio. Mirio was surprised to see those creatures emerging from AFO's fingertips, and he quickly tried to fly away. Then, 5 other snakes appeared from his blind spots and rammed at him fast enough to prevent him from using his quirk to get away. Mirio was now being shoved around in the air as those 10 snakes treated him like a football. He was going from one head to another. Those creatures weren't doing too much damage to him, but they were trying him up and not giving him time to react. AFO was now ready to try to cripple Mirio with one of his quirks, but then a massive blast of fire engulfed his body, and that forced him to deactivate Hydra to defend himself. The hero Endeavor was on the ground and had used his ultimate move, Prominence Burn. As AFO was distracted with Mirio, he believed that his attack managed to make a dent in the villain. But as the smoke around AFO dissipated and he saw how AFO's body was barely burned, then he saw how his attack appeared to do nothing to him. Look what we have here, one of the biggest failures that the Japanese hero community has produced since their conception, and I know what I am talking about since I have been around for a long time. AFO said as he looked at the hero, whose bloodline had been filled with massive disappointments thanks to the hero's own actions and the ones of his most successful children. You BSTRD? Endeavor said. Me? A BSTRD? Maybe, but I am not the one whose firstborn had turned into a deranged pyromaniac who died like the failure that he truly was, and whose last child, the one that had a perfect quirk for heroics, had failed time and time again to do something noteworthy, as he is determined to use half of his quirk to be a hero out of spite for what you did. The only thing he managed to be is a failure that failed even the remedial exam to get the temporal hero license because he refuses to use his fire even in a situation that his fire would have been a correct choice over his ice. Those failures are on you. And to think that I saved that little shit of your first child when he almost killed himself with his fire that time. AFO said, his words caught Endeavor's attention. What? Oh, you don't know. You dear Toya wanted to share with you a discovery about his quirk on the day that he disappeared. That discovery was that his quirk evolved and the flames that he could emit were now even more powerful and changed to become blue flames. But you paid him the wrong kind of attention that he needed when wanted to show you that. So he lost himself in his negative emotions and almost burned himself to death when he was overwhelmed by despair in that incident that almost burned a whole mountain near your residence all those years ago. I found your dear child, almost burned to death, and took him to one of my facilities to save his life. But he repaid my kindness when I saved my life by burning one of the orphanages that I had. AFO said, while Endeavor was now remembering the events that AFO was talking about. Endeavor remembered that day that he caught Toya with nasty burn scars on his CHSD, and he didn't try to talk with him or give him a chance to explain himself. He just demanded him stop doing what he was doing. And to now hear that the reason for those flames that happened all those years ago were because of Toya's despair was another thing to add to the list of failures that he had accumulated in his quest to surpass All Might. In his quest to surpass All Might, he created a family just to destroy it with his ambitions to the point that he had completely destroyed his career now that the corruption of the HPSC had been revealed and his name was part of the heroes that were under their thumb. He drove his wife to madness to the point that she attacked Shoto with how water to scar his face when she had a fit of madness caused by the stress that she endured because his stupid choices, his first child to his own death, and while the second and third kids were more or less better adjusted. He knew that Natsuo hated his guts with everything he had and Fuyumi was suffering because she was unable to keep whatever remained of their family from breaking apart because of his poor decisions. Then it was Shoto, his youngest child, and the one that had the quirk that he envisioned. And when he tried to avoid the mistakes that he committed when he trained Toya, he just not only repeated them, but made even more mistakes, to the point that he refused to use his fire, and the only reason that he was still in the hero course. Even though the whole hero community believed that Shoto was a lost cause and should be kicked out of the hero course, was because he was now the principal of UA. But now that things were going down with the public discovery of the corruption of the HPSC and the public losing faith in the heroes, then Endeavor knew that this was his last dance as a hero, no matter what happened. The incident in Tokyo in which he died was something that he was going to carry out anyway regardless of what I had in mind. So I offered him a collaboration to boost the League of Villains' reputation at that time, but he had the gall to refuse me. So I used one quirk to break his mind and turn him into a mindless drone that would burn himself to death as the Nomus caused chaos to suit my plans. AFO said as he saw how Endeavor was staring at him after hearing about how he saved Toya's life that time. Now after AFO revealed that he was the one that destroyed Endeavor's first son's mind to turn him into a disposable weapon for his villainous ploys, Endeavor's face was now showing an expression that was part rage, part sorrow as he was coming to terms with his failures as a man, hero, and a family man. Mirio decided to take that moment that AFO was too busy gloating and hurting Endeavor psychologically to punch the villain in the back. AFO managed to activate Air Wall to block that attack, but while that stopped AFO's words from injuring Endeavor, the damage was already done, and Endeavor stood there for a while as Mirio and AFO traded blows in the air. Slowly, but surely, more heroes that had managed to restrain and incapacitate the villains that were in the area where Izuku was, and while he stood there in silence, the other heroes tried their best to live up to what it meant to be a hero and join the fray as well. Those heroes were no match for AFO, who used Hydra to try to swat them away like they were flies. But they refused to back down and still tried to fight even if they were risking their lives. Endeavor felt ashamed and walked to where Izuku was and saw how those dark vines were keeping him immobilized and out of commission. He paid attention to Izuku's surroundings and saw how some of those dark vines were attaching themselves to the soil around them and even some trees around the area. Endeavor didn't know what were the effects of the quirk that was affecting Izuku, or if there was something that could be done to quickly free him from his restraints. But Endeavor had a hunch about what he needed to do and activated his quirk a little. Endeavor may not deserve to be a hero now, or even had the right to fight for Japan after what he did, but he knew that there was still one thing that he could do to make things right. AFO was starting to get overwhelmed a little by the combined assault of the heroes, who allowed Mirio to sneak in order to find a better position to strike back. Those heroes lacked the strength and power to even make a dent in him, but even with their meager might, those heroes were enough of a pest for AFO to try to divert part of his attention from Mirio to them. The one that was the worst offender was Mirko, who was actively using all those snakes that he summoned from his back as platforms for her to jump from one place to another and more than once. He had to block her diving kicks with Air Wall to avoid being kicked in the head, but then Mirio took advantage of the situation and hit him from a direction that he was not defending himself. Mirko was definitely enjoying this fight with this supervillain, and while she would have preferred to go on one with him, she had enough common sense to understand that this was not the time for that kind of thinking. She was one of the few heroes that were able to get close enough to the villain, and she resigned herself to attacking first to keep the attention of the villain on her so Mirio could cause some damage. That strategy worked well enough. But then a new individual joined the fight as it descended from the sky out of nowhere. United States? A recognizable voice came from above them all, and that made all the heroes, and even AFO, look at the sky. It can't be. It's him. We're saved. Some of the heroes started to say, as they recognized the voice of the #1 hero of Japan. AFO stopped himself in his tracks as he looked at the air and saw the imposing figure of his most hated opponent, diving through the sky as his fist was ready to impact with him in a couple of seconds. Smash! All Might finished saying as he already reached AFO's position and punched the man with all the power he could muster. He decided to jump from the aircraft when they saw the fight, and he refused to wait. He ignored the parachute as he could fly for a while with his quirk and decided to try to end the life of the new vessel from AFO in one single motion. The moment that his fist collided with AFO's head, both went to the ground in which the ruins of the castle were located, and a massive crater was created where they landed. A massive cloud of dust had risen from the might of that impact, and now the heroes were waiting with bated breath to see or hear if this was over, but until AFO was dead for good, the world wouldn't know peace. All Might was still on the bottom of the crater that his attack had created, his fist still on the ground as he saw how half of AFO's face had been caved in as a result of his fist colliding with his face. All Might could see that AFO was still alive and the damage that he had suffered was quickly healing up. All Might quickly got out of the way as AFO retaliated seconds later with multiple snakes that emerged from the ground and started to destroy the center of the island. Not bad, All Might, but I was prepared for this kind of powerful attack of yours, AFO said as he remembered how All Might critically wounded him in the past, and how no amount of healing quirks that he stole and used on himself were able to restore him back to his prime. That cache of healing quirks and physical enhancement ones that he left inside his original quirk to be transferred were the closest thing that AFO had to an insurance policy in case he faced similar powerful opponents. As long as those passive quirks were active, then anything else from erasing him from existence would get rid of him. Damn it, All Might said, somewhat frustrated at the fact that the damage that he caused wasn't slowing AFO down. Despite all that had happened between us, I am happy to see you here, All Might. I was sure in a way that Nine's plan to keep you out of his way was going to fail one way or another because you are a cockroach that refuses to stay down for too long. AFO said with a malicious smirk after he got out of the crater and started to float in the air. I can say the same to you. You were killed once, yet you refused to die by the looks of it. All Might said. He looked at the heroes around him and saw that they were tired and somewhat injured, but they were still willing to fight. I had plans to find a new body to surpass the limitations of my original body, so killing that old body was just a temporary setback at best. I wanted that stupid brat to be my next vessel, but his mind became too fragile and was unable to handle the strain of having two quirks at the same time, so I had to improvise and use this lab rat that had already fulfilled his purpose to have a new body, and it's fulfilling my expectations far better than I expected. AFO said. It appeared to him that the doctor had been busy preparing this body for him to use and was happy with the results. He was almost starting to feel fully in control, and it wouldn't be long before he was able to win this fight. This isn't over yet, All Might said, clenching his fist as he prepared himself to rush the villain once again. I know, and I will enjoy watching all of you die at my hands before I reclaim what is rightfully mine, AFO said as he looked at All Might and decided to switch tactics. Now, he decided to use weather manipulation to manipulate the weather around him, causing a thunderstorm that was going to strike the heroes down from a distance as he was busy fighting All Might. The heroes had to quickly retire from the island while avoiding the lightning storm and thunder falling on them. Those who were able to resist the electricity better tried their best to shield the others, but now only AFO, All Might, and Mirio were inside the island. AFO decided to use weather manipulation to create a giant tornado to keep them both trapped there while preventing anyone else from interfering. The final stage for the battle between AFO and OFA was set now, and all the pieces were in their position. Now it was time to put an end to this feud once and for all. Star and Stripe and Sir Night-Eye had landed on Nabo Island before AFO created that tornado, and while they were walking in the direction of said tornado, they saw how the civilians were turning against each other and the heroes that were retreating from the battlefield. The sight of multiple heroes coming to the island to face AFO, and then the destruction caused by their fight, not only put them on edge, but pushed some of them to the brink, and they snapped into a frenzy. From their point of view, the jig was up, and they would be eventually arrested for being minions of AFO, so they decided to try and futilely fight the heroes to avoid being jailed. You go ahead, I will try to restore the order in this place, Sir Night-Eye said, looking at how some of those civilians that weren't fighting the heroes were suddenly joining the fray to fight the heroes back, and he was starting to think that maybe this place wasn't as innocent as it appeared. Damn it, Star and Stripe said. She wanted to stay and fight back, but considering what All Might and Sir Night-Eye revealed to her about AFO before they reached the island, she knew that she needed to get into the fight with an AFO as fast as possible to help. Sir Night-Eye saw how the heroine broke into a sprint as he told her to go ahead, and then he turned his head to the chaos in this small settlement. The civilians were somewhat more adept with the usage of their quirks to fight by the looks of it, and that didn't help him to consider this place as nothing better than a den of scum and villainy. He pulled a weighted seal that he had in his pocket and launched at one bulky islander who was trying to choke a hero with his bare hands. Then he grabbed the wrist of one lanky shark woman who tried to bite his head off and activate his quirk before incapacitating her with a judo throw. Sir Night-Eye muttered as he saw what was coming to this villain and those that were part of this undercover base of operation of AFO, and then relaxed a little. He continued fighting as hard as he could even if what he saw was a positive outcome, as he knew that his visions weren't as fallible as he believed before, and if he wanted what he saw to come to pass, then he needed to pull his weight around. It was to them to stop AFO for good, and Sir Night-Eye had his own role to play in this fight to save the day. Inside the tornado that trapped AFO, All Might, and Mirio on the island, AFO was now fighting both All Might and Mirio at the same time. Both All Might and Mirio fought side by side while trying to cover their weaknesses and were making an impressive effort, but without the other heroes providing a distraction and the occasional attack that got in his way. AFO was holding the advantage in this situation. The only saving grace was that AFO was unable to move it that much, as weather manipulation took a lot of concentration for him to use, and AFO only was able to use weather manipulation alongside other quirks at the moment if he stood still. But being forced to stand still in one place didn't mean that he was defenseless. Hydra, Air Wall, and a plethora of offensive quirks that were at AFO's disposal were keeping the two heroes at arm's length. And the more time passed, the easier it became for AFO to keep up with the demands of weather manipulation while active alongside other quirks. "We are running out of options," Mirio said. He didn't want to lose hope, but he was starting to tire out, and to see how AFO was getting better and better while he was running out of steam was starting to demoralize him a little. "We can't give up, Mirio. As long as we stand up and fight, we haven't lost yet," All Might said, trying to keep Mirio's spirits up. He was more rested than Mirio was, and he had still the strength to fight, but he couldn't blame Mirio for that moment of weakness. "Well said, All Might, but for how much longer you two can stand up? I won't kill Mirio, even if I'm going to. Make him wish for death. But you All Might, I will kill you. Mark my words," AFO said. He was ready to summon one of the heads of Hydra from his back to fire a laser beam that would vaporize All Might. All Might clenched his fists, and then he tried to rush at AFO to try to stop him, but then something happened. "What the?" Mirio said. He said as he saw how a gigantic fist made of solid air went through the tornado and dispelled it as the fist went upwards. All Might and Mirio saw a gigantic version of Star and Stripe's upper body made of solid air. Then before they were able to realize what happened, they had been teleported back to where the restrained villains and Star and Stripe were located. "What the?" All Might said. He looked at his surroundings and saw that some trees and vegetation aside from one particular tree had been burned to ashes as Endeavor was there, silently looking at the battlefield. "What happened?" Mirio asked. Midoriya was surrounded by some strange black vines that kept him out of commission. "I used my flames to burn the vegetation around him, as those vines were draining resources from the trees and foliage around the area to keep themselves active. But until Star and Stripe came, Midoriya was unable to fully wake up," Endeavor said. He managed to figure out a way to weaken those black vines by burning all the vegetation that had been surrounded by those vines, and while Endeavor was unwilling to use his flames to burn Izuku himself, the moment that All Might dived from the sky and punched AFO in the head, at that moment those vines vanished from Izuku's body. "I see. And I must assume that Midoriya somehow pulled us out of the island. But where is he?" All Might said. He then saw how Endeavor pointed at the gigantic Star and Stripe made of air, and he saw that Izuku was somehow managing to stay afloat in one of her shoulders. "What is he going to?" Mirio said as he saw how the gigantic version of Star and Stripe was getting ready to punch the whole island just to kill AFO. AFO reacted in time and used Air Wall alongside other quirks to stop that gigantic fist of wind from crushing him. And then they saw how Izuku created red ice atop that extended arm that he used to skate his way down to face AFO. "You two, get over there quickly and finish the job. We can't hold him down for too long," Star and Stripe warned both All Might and Mirio, who saw how Izuku already reached AFO and saw how his eyes glowed red. Then AFO was trapped in a block of red ice. Izuku took some distance as he made sure that the block of ice was becoming solid enough to keep AFO trapped for a little more time in case this plan failed. "That's," Mirio said, recognizing the fact that Izuku was using Erasure to disable AFO's quirks. But then he sensed how All Might gently push a hand on his left shoulder, and then both knew what to do. Both Mirio and All Might rushed at top speed as they flew through the air, and both got ready to use one of All Might's signature moves to end the fight once and for all. Double Detroit Smash. Both shouted as their fists connected with the trapped AFO inside that red block of ice, and then said block of ice, and the trapped AFO inside of it were broken apart into multiple small fragments that flew away into the sea and horizon. At last, the battle was over, and they had won. As the shattered fragments of the ice block that contained AFO were melting on the ground, the realization that AFO was gone for good was starting to settle in both Mirio's and All Might's minds. "It's over now," All Might said. He finally avenged his master and her family's destruction at the hands of AFO. "Yeah, we did it," "We defeated AFO," Mirio said. When he woke up that morning and joined Izuku, the police, and other heroes in their plan to arrest the people of the HPSC, he didn't expect things to go like this, but now that AFO was gone for good, Mirio expected things to calm down for a while. Izuku looked at both, and while he wanted to be happy about the fact that AFO was out of the picture, he knew that there was still a lot to be done after the fight. The issue with the HPSC corruption and how the country was still in a state of turmoil, the actions of Zenin against the HPSC, and how they made the situation worse in a way even if that was because of the corruption of the HPSC. And now that AFO was out of the picture and the island was littered with villains, and Nomus made Izuku think that there was going a lot of job to do before the situation returned back to normal. But AFO being out of the picture helped. That is good, but there is still a lot to do after this. The public unrest, the villains that we defeated and captured, and the Nomus that are in this place. We're going to be busy for a while, and I'm not taking into consideration the fact that the WHA will have to come here to try to deal with the mess of the HPSC corruption that had in part kick-started the mess of this day. Needless to say, I'm going to be busy for a while, Izuku said, sighing a little. The Nomus, there are a lot of them in Atheon as well, All Might said. And then he saw how Izuku looked exasperated after hearing that. Of course they had to be in Atheon as well. So, I guess that I will have to rely on your help again to deal with them. I can see that I will have no free time in my immediate future after class for a while, Izuku said. All Might chuckled a little at Izuku's words, and then gently tapped him on his right shoulder. Don't worry, Midoriya. You can count on my help, as always. The Nomus that we faced in Atheon are now restrained and waiting to be transported to Japan. We may need to talk with the WHA about what we can do for them, but I am sure that we would manage, All Might said. Izuku smiled a little, and then decided to respond. Yeah, thanks for the offer. But first, let's deal with what we have in front of us, because I think that partial the destruction of Mount Shirayama, even if it was to stop a dangerous villain, is going to be a small problem, Izuku said. All Might and Mirio looked at their surroundings and saw that what it was a small island with a mountain had been almost decimated in their fight with AFO. The damage done to this place had definitely destroyed some of the remains of the history of those who lived here in the past, and that could be a problem. But there was nothing that they could do about what happened during that fight with AFO. And after the realization that their job as heroes wasn't done even if AFO was out of the picture for God, the three of them walked away to Nabo Island as the last shard of ice that contained a small fragment of one of AFO's ice shattered. The aftermath of the events of today would mark an important development in the story of Japan. A week passed since that day, and as Izuku suspected, killing AFO wasn't the end of their problems. The WHA stepped in to deal with the situation with the Japanese branch of HPSC, and while they temporarily took over their duties while searching for the right kind of people to take over after they were done, there was one issue that the WHA decided to tackle themselves over, leaving it to whatever people that they left in charge. All the heroes that were involved in the detainment of the previous members of the HPSC for their corruption were given an official pardon for what they did that day, because what Izuku and the others did when they decided to detain them was not only illegal, but also there was a proper protocol in place to do that. Processed legally to prevent that a hero that decided that they knew better that the HPSC could take over them would have the approval or any sight of being legitimacy to act like that by the WHA should that event happen. But considering the chaotic situation in the world when that happened and the fact that Izuku and those heroes limited themselves to detain the madam presented and the rest overtaking over, then it was decided to give them a pardon for what they did over terminating their licenses as heroes for what they did. But that didn't mean that some of those heroes kept their licenses as heroes for different reasons. Endeavor decided to give up his license as a hero, and quite a couple of days after AFO died, as he considered himself that he had failed to be a hero for far too long. And with the revelation of his family situation and how his first son was part of the villains that almost burned a part of Tokyo to the ground, Endeavor chances to keep any kind of positive public opinion were next to none in the hero's eyes. In an ironic twist, that decision to quit heroism out his own volition alongside the fact that some of the heroes that were forced to give up their licenses for their involvement with the HPSC had a less than dignified reaction to their termination as heroes made Endeavor's decision to bow out with dignity after publicly acknowledging his failures made that a lot of the people of Japan considered that maybe Endeavor deserved a second chance to be a hero, but Endeavor decided that before being a hero again, he needed to fix up the mistakes that he made as a man, father, and husband before even thinking to become a hero again. Two of those heroes who didn't bow out with grace or any dignity were Eraserhead and Nizu. Eraserhead decided to work as an enforcer of the HPSC for their dirty business and was quite effective in it thanks to his cynic outlook as a person and accumulated an impressive track record of missions done for the HPSC in that short time after he was fired from UA and had, in theory, lost his license as a hero for trying to attack Izuku unprovoked after the final exam before the summer camp. Eraserhead didn't mind it to dirty his hands to keep Japan safe, and now that the HPSC was being torn down and the rotted parts were being torn apart, then Eraserhead was on the chopping block and not only lost his license, but was sent to Tartarus for what he did. Nizu, for his part, had been quite busy after he was forced to step down as a principal from UA. He decided to track and coerce a pair of low-level villains named Gentle and La Brava, to have them work for him under the guise of a rehabilitation, and he used them alongside his resources to create the identity of Yuzanon, the hacker. And then he waged war with the HPSC by trying to hack and leak information of the HPSC corruption to the public, not out of a desire for justice, but because he wanted revenge for losing his position as principal of UA, and not only needs to keep information of the HPSC people and their crimes, but also was gathering information about Izuku and his family, and was close enough to find the truth about his ancestors. But he was stopped in his tracks and sent to Tartarus as well. Gentle and La Brava were detained, but they were sent to a less strict place than Tartarus and eventually gained the chance to be rehabilitated for real. For the time being, Izuku was busy using his quirk and what he had to restore those nomas that were found in Atheon and Nabo. Those two places had suffered a lot thanks to AFO's machinations, and while Nabo Island was deserted after almost all the people who lived there were detained and sent to jail for their association with AFO, Atheon was slowly being rebuilt without having to worry about any trouble with villains thanks to the help of the European Union heroes that were having an easier time all around thanks to the fact that the Galini family was now out of the streets anymore. Nobody knew what the future had in store for Izuku and the rest. But Izuku hoped that nothing as big as this would happen again, so he could focus on his goals for the future, but time would tell. And with that, this documentary about the corruption of the HPSC and their dirty business is over. In a small TV that was located inside a small office, a documentary about what happened in the past 9 years with the HPSC before the WHA took over the situation and managed to rebuild the institution was being played. In that office, multiple photos of a green-haired boy with red eyes in different situations, from the day that he got his license as a hero, to when he graduated from UA, and then when he graduated in a university in Tokyo. Multiple photos of Izuku's mundane, yet important moment were shown in his office. At the age of 25, Izuku Midoriya managed to succeed in his desire to open a private clinic after not only graduating from UA, but also going through Tokyo Medical University a couple of times to get the education and the job qualifications to not only a doctor, but also a psychiatrist, a surgeon, and a court counselor, among other things, to manage to fulfill his ambition. Dr. Midoriya, a female voice said after he heard the sound of someone knocking on the door of his office. "Is something wrong, Himiko?" Izuku said, and then he saw how Himiko Toga entered his office. "I received a call from Lemillion and some other heroes that want to ask if you would attend the Hero Billboard Chart event of this year," Himiko said. She had gone from a girl who turned to villainy out of madness and despair to a normal and well-adjusted woman who had a job that she liked alongside the man she ended up loving and falling for. Himiko listened to Izuku's request to have her decide in the future, so she could help him with helping people. And after some time thinking about it, she decided to take a step forward and continued her studies. In the end, she graduated as well in the same university as Izuku did and became a pediatrician and counselor that worked with kids. She managed to connect better with those kids with issues with their quirks thanks to her past experiences and felt a sense of pride and accomplishment when she managed to help kids that were in similar situations as she was in the past before she snapped and helped them from taking the same path as she did in the past. She was also the receptionist, and even if they had the money and resources to run a whole hospital, both Izuku and Himiko preferred to work in a smaller scale. Even if their clinic was as big as a hospital with the number of people that came here to the point that Izuku decided to hire more people to manage the amount of people that he had to take care of it. Oh, is that time of the year again? I would rather not, but I am still an active hero, and even if I just mind my own business, I need from time to time to socialize with my colleagues and friends that work in the hero business. Izuku admitted. After the events that ended with the fall of AFO and the HPSC, Izuku managed to continue his studies in peace while keeping up his job as a hero to gain and save money for the future. With Sir Night-Eye taking over the HPSC after it had been cleared of the corruption of his predecessors, and All Might retiring at last to take care of Tenko Shimura to honor his mentor, there wasn't another villain that rocked the boat as AFO did, and the world enjoyed a time of peace. Mirio became the next #1 in Japan and took the mantle that All Might left behind. And while Izuku managed to somewhat fade into the background, Mirio wanted people to see what Izuku did for society, even when he wasn't a full-time hero and aside from publicity and funding, a thing that Izuku, unfortunately, didn't manage to convince Mirio that he didn't need. Mirio was usually found in his private clinic when he wanted to talk with him about certain cases of when he found out an abused kid and wanted for him to take care of him. So, that is a yes? Himiko asked with a small smirk. She had grown out from her days as a villain who wandered the streets, and while she didn't grow taller, she ditched the hair buns, let her hair be free, and wore a pair of glasses. I guess I will. I want to see how Kinoko and the others are doing, Izuku said. It's good to hear that. The voice of the new #1 reached their ears, and they saw how Mirio's face permeated through one of the walls. A thing that in the past surprised Himiko, but now became something common. Come on, Mirio. You should know better to do that here, Izuku said with a small chuckle. Mirio tended to spend some of his free time coming here to cheer up the kids that ended up staying in his clinic for longer periods of time, and some of the kids enjoyed seeing the #1 hero coming there to see if they were doing all right during their stay. Sorry, I had to pull this particular trick of mine to bust a drug deal, Mirio sheepishly said. His hair now was a pompadour, and Izuku remembered that comment that he made about a dream in which Mirio had one pompadour all those years ago. Fair enough, but as I said, I will attend that event this year, as long as nothing that requires my immediate attention pops up, Izuku said. Understandable. So I guess I will be seeing you soon there, Mirio said. Yeah. But now that you are here, can you do me a solid? Izuku asked. Sure, if I can do it, I will, Mirio said, curious about what Izuku had in mind. Okay then, just go and pick up Ikari from school today for me, Izuku said. Is that all? Mirio asked, a little surprised to see that Izuku was telling him to pick up his daughter for him from school today. Yeah, her birthday is coming soon, and she would love to see his favorite uncle taking time off his busy schedule to pick her up from school. Don't you agree? Izuku said. Fine, I will do this for her, Mirio said, and then they talked about some heroic business thing before Mirio decided to go to that favor to Izuku. With that out of the way, Himiko and Izuku returned to their work for the day before Mirio brought his daughter to the clinic. In comparison to his days as a student from UA and the second youngest hero in Japan, he was busier even if he was making more money than before, but he still made the effort to make time for his family, even if he was busy. The future of this world was day by day slipping away from his hands, and said future was now in the hands of those who came after him. And Izuku wanted to make sure that those who still had a chance to be saved from a horrid future were able to find something better than what was meant for him. Because sometimes, the best way to stop a potential villain from appearing was to make sure that they didn't lose the hope of a better tomorrow as a child. So while Mirio and his friends fought their battles against the present threats, Izuku fought his own battles to stop villains from being created by saving those potential villains from their destiny, if he could help it. That was the kind of hero that he decided to be a long time ago. And now, and until the day he was unable to continue, he would do what he can to stick to his ideals. He looked at one of the photos that he had on his desk about his daughter, and after seeing her green hair with hair buns and those yellow eyes, Izuku returned to his job. Thank you for joining us on this journey through What If Deku Had Blood Manipulation Quirk. We hope you found it as captivating as we did. A big thank you to Judas Magnus, 1994, for creating such an engaging story. Don't forget to visit their profile on archiveofourown.org for more fantastic works. The link is in the description below. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and subscribe to Zenin Fanfics for more intriguing explorations into fanfiction and fantasy. Your support helps us create more content like this, and we love hearing your thoughts and suggestions in the comment section. See you soon in the next video.